Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 384, The Old Egyptian Faith. Link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs. This is 168 pages, so it's a longer read. It's fairly full length to intermediate. It's an interesting work, and the title is pretty indicative of the content. It's effectively a laundry list of everything regarding the Egyptian religion in antiquity, over the course of several thousand years. So you've got incantations, spells were important, of course, the hierarchy of the deities, and a little bit of the backstory of their interactions together, such as when Ra, who has become old and kind of feeble, and this is somewhat of a confusing amalgamation of tales when you look at the Egyptian religious system, because there are a million different writings, and a lot of times, like, the spells and stories don't really coincide with each other. They come from vastly different traditions, because, of course, in Egypt, we think of it as, well, paganism, and this is the Egyptian paganism. Well, no, there were 1,000 different cults under Egyptian paganism. They had different spells, different gods were worshipped different ways, they had different stories behind them. A lot of them were localized in the sense of almost like city-states, similar to the cults of Greece or of Rome. And so what happens is you get this rather confusing, like the Book of the Dead is a collection of all of these different funerary materials designed to help the soul when it's traversing the judgment and the afterlife and so forth, and sometimes things don't quite sync up. Thought the most interesting story, though, was Ra. At one point, Isis tricks him essentially into giving her his real name, the one sort of holy pronunciation that gives you enormous power, and does this by getting him, I think, bitten by a serpent or a scorpion or something. And he's in great pain. She's like, "Oh, I can heal you, but I need to know your name." It's like, I guess he couldn't do it himself and needed a third party. And so finally she learns his name. And there's a bunch of stories about that. There's a whole section on healing and sort of the religio-medicinal aspect as well. And that plays a heavy role. Thoth especially plays a big role in that as sort of a healing deity at times, a destroyer as well. And again, the nature of their gods is not always completely understood because there are contradictory things in different traditions. About the only one that's truly fleshed out is Ra, when you or the story of like Horus and Set. That's pretty set in stone. That and Ra being the sun and being the divine total. Beyond that, there's a lot of intrigue. It sort of is a little bit like the ancient Greek religion, only a little bit less on the philosophical side at times. There's a huge amount of coverage of the funerary aspect, though. This was something, they talk about the Book of the Dead heavily, as I mentioned. This was something in Egypt that was very, very important. So they would have like books in which you had inscriptions and prayers to bury it with the mummy. That was to safeguard them and give them the power that they needed to get past the flaming crocodile and the dog god and all of these other things to the final judgment, and then with the right, invocations, even if you weren't perfect all the time, you'd still end up in paradise. It's sort of similar to Elysius when you think about it. Even their concept of the underworld, though, changed over time. What was at times rather materialistic, if not atheistic, rather blunted and sort of Greek, in the sense of the early Greek religion. When you went to the underworld, it was, unless you were really heroic and you had been effectively chosen by the gods themselves, you were destined to a dark, gloomy, swampy place, kind of similar to the river Styx in hell under Dante, only without sinners fighting each other, a place of forgetfulness, in which you became sort of like an ethereal shade, and it wasn't a very nice place to be. You weren't suffering, but there was a lot of loneliness, darkness, and it was like mushrooms and ferns and shit. Gloomy. The Goths would like this particular religion, I suppose. For everyone else, they're like, hey, maybe we'll adopt the Roman system. It sounds a little bit more positive at times. Hey, what's this Elysius I hear about? Well, it makes people more heroic because they want that for themselves. Religion tends to do this, offering people rewards for certain behaviors that benefit the religion, of course, and the state. Very good work. Overall, extremely comprehensive. It's one of the better works of Egyptology that I've run across. And I just got, by the way, several dozen new texts, so I'll be busy for the next half a decade or so. So keeping in mind, I'm not going to end things just because I hit number 400. It's just that I want to rush those out as quickly as possible had a dozen works half created anyway, so I might as well plow through them. Again, link of my to my work, my edition on Amazon, in the description. Second and third links to my books, blogs. I do highly recommend this. If you're into Egyptology or paganism in general, or religious history in general, this is definitely one of the better works that I've edited, and the best that regards Egypt. That's about all. Peace out.